was a center in junior, but there's a lot of kids who end up playing center in junior. They come up, can't cut it, and end up moving to the wing. It happens all the time, and I think for Raquel, that could be an option if they want to have three quality centers, like if they want Getzlaf, Raquel, and Adam Henrique, then that's a way they could go. But that limits their options on the wing a lot, and I'm sure we all loved how Raquel looked on the left side of Ryan Getzlaf. I don't think they really want to change that up and mess anything up there.
No, especially with the option of Patrick Eves coming back to take the other wing. I mean, that's something the Ducks have been trying to get a solidified top line since Perry's production, as we all know, is regressing season by season. And then what about the thoughts, and I don't think it's happening, but what are your thoughts on Kalle Kosela coming up, if this is the case for Ryan Kesler from the Gulls?
I mean, he's the most likely guy that was in San Diego last year at center to get called up. He was arguably their best player. But again, I think for those guys, him, Sam Steele, Troy Terry, I think it comes down to training camp, honestly, and who impresses more. He might have a slight edge over a guy like Sam Steele because he's played a couple seasons in pro hockey down in San Diego, and he's played a handful of games. I think he's played about 12 games with the Ducks. So he's got a little bit of experience that might win out if they're very close in training camp. But I'm sure the Ducks are eager to get Sam Steele in the lineup based off of not just his Memorial Cup play a couple weeks ago, but just based off his play with Regina in general and in the World Juniors. I think we're all waiting for him to get into the lineup, and if it's close, it's going to be a tough call. But he could. He honestly could. I think he projects more as a winger, just like I do with Rickard Rakell. I think even when Kosela came up, he did play on the wing. So that's an option, but I think Sam Steele might win out if he can impress at center.
I mean, that would be a great option, right? If he's able to come out and play at that level, just based on his performance coming up through, was it the OHL he was playing in, correct?
The WHL.
WHL. So him coming up through would be great if he's able to repeat anywhere close to that. I mean, he's put up insane numbers the last two seasons, and like you just talked about, Memorial Cup, winning the MVP of that whole thing.
Yeah.
Just a highly regarded player in the Ducks depth chart. Henrique does seem like the most logical move. I would have to go with that. I mean, mainly because his line wasn't running on all cylinders anyway. So why not mix it up and put him on the line with Andrew Cogliano and Jakob Silfverberg to start next season if this is the case with Brian Kesler? But how do you feel about if they were to make a move? Is there something along a free agent that you're interested in, or a trade you'd be interested in checking out based on who's available?
At center, it's tough because, if Ryan Kesler is just out for a bit, then I don't think they go down a trade again because they already did that when they got Adam Henrique. And if you think he's going to come back and you make a trade for a second line or a third line center, then you've given away an asset for a guy that doesn't really fit in your lineup when Ryan Kesler comes back. But free agency could be an option. And again, it all depends on the status of Ryan Kesler. But there are some big names out there. I mean, Paul Stastny, and you look at what he did with Winnipeg when he went over there, and he was playing with Patrick Laine and I believe Nikolai Ehlers on a line that really gelled together quickly. He would be a guy that would end up costing a lot. And again, that would have to be the case if Ryan Kesler was put on the long-term injury reserve for them to even be able to afford to bring him in. He made $7.5 million last year. That was from his contract in Colorado. He probably would make about 5 or 6 based off the centers available in free agency this year. That's like a top end, and we'll get to the real top end with John Tavares later. But there's some minor options, I guess. I mean, I don't know how you feel about these guys, but Tyler Bozak, Thomas Plekanec, Valtteri Filppula, Matt Stajan. I mean, they're not sexy names out there. Really, they're most of them, maybe other than Tyler Bozak, are borderline fourth line centers. I don't know. How do you feel about a guy like, if you had to bring a guy like Tyler Bozak? I mean, he had 42 points in 80 games last year. He was making $4.2 million. I mean, he's a stopgap option, at least for now, at third line center until Ryan Kesler comes back. But if you end up paying him $3 million, is it even worth it?
I feel like it might be. He has 98 points over his last 159 games.
Yeah,
it's nothing. That's not too shabby for a guy who's 32. I don't think he's going to get $4 million out of the Ducks. He might get 2. I mean, I don't see him getting more than that. And he's exactly what I feel the Ducks would want in a player, right? I mean, he's reliable, and he's a third-line guy,
that's the
center
big thing
depth.
right there, right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and even a cheaper option from Boston, a guy like Riley Nash.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't put up a ton of points. He had his most points of his career last year with 41. So, I mean, there's an option there too, and that's more or less the pocketbook of the Ducks, trying not to spend a ton of money, although the cap is rumored to be going up as much to $82 million, if I remember correctly, which would give the Ducks plenty of breathing room if they wanted to bring in somebody big, but I don't know how much they're willing to spend since they've spent to the cap this year. I don't know. I feel like if I could pick any of these guys, I mean, obviously out of the realm of possibility in my eyes is John Tavares. And we can get to that in a bit. I know we just said that, but I mean, what about a Paul Stastny? That's the guy that I would like fitting in here on the Ducks. I think he'd be a great player for Anaheim. I mean, how do you feel about him? He had a great showing with the Jets. He didn't play too bad in the playoffs at all.
Yeah, no, I would love him to be a member of the Ducks. Again, the only issue I keep coming back to is if Ryan Kesler ends up coming back, then you've got Getzlaf, Kesler, Henrique, and Stastny in the middle. I mean, there's no way you're playing one of those guys on the fourth line. I think even last year is a bit of a stretch playing Adam Henrique on the third line based off his production and the type of player I think he thinks he could be. He's more of a second line center. So it's tough. I mean, if Ryan Kesler either if it's publicly stated that he's out for the entire season, or if he ends up retiring, which obviously we don't hope happens, but that could be a possibility where then you have all that cap space and you can go out and almost like for like in production, you could bring in a guy like Paul Stastny. That's a possibility, but I mean, let's be honest. I think the most likely option for the Ducks here is they go out and they get probably a fourth line guy for cover. Maybe bring back Derek Grant, or go out and get Jay Beagle or Derek Ryan or Mark Letetsu and just kind of bring in a guy who can move up and down the third and fourth line until he gets back, and hoping that a guy in the system already like Kalle Kesler or Sam Steele can actually get things going out of camp and be a big part of the lineup.
Yeah, I would agree. That's more the Ducks style. They're not going to bring in a flashy guy that's going to steal a veteran spot. I mean, Kesler is part of the leadership and core of this group, and I don't think them bringing in a big name, would rub him the right way. You know what I mean? Since he's trying to come back from a major injury, that he'd be like, oh, great, now you got a star player to come take my spot? Like, what does that mean to me? That's just not the Ducks style. I think more or less their style is going to bring in a guy to fill a role, like you just said, in the bottom six, and then move a guy up. Derek Grant's obviously a guy they made him top line center for some points last year through all the injuries. And then Gordon Bombay mentioned in our chat, Kesler has the experience. Can't see RC skipping him. I'd have to agree with that too. I mean, RC loves guys that have any kind of playing time in the NHL, and he always makes the young guys earn it. And I think Kesler would definitely be an option if they can't go out and grab somebody to fill a bottom six role. They just bring up a kid.
Yeah, and Chase hits on that too. He says preseason could be the testing ground for replacements, and that seems like more the direction the Ducks tend to go. Is I think they have a lot of faith in the prospects they have coming up. Again, mentioning Kalle Kesler and Sam Steele and even Troy Terry, and trying these guys out at center, and still they have that backup option if they really want to go that way and move Ricard Raquel to second line center. Again, it's not something I'd want to see, and even Connor in our chat said that he'd be against it, but that is a backup option for them if they want to go that route. If they're very desperate and guys just aren't working out, Sam Steele ends up not being ready, Kalle Kesler doesn't impress out of camp, Troy Terry's not working at center, then maybe if it's too late after and you didn't get a free agent on July 1st, then maybe you move Raquel to second line center, and at least you can do that for the time being until you either go out and acquire a center or find a different option to move in there.
All right, well let's talk about the sexy names. Let's start with the one we pushed back twice in a matter of 2 minutes. John Tavares. Lou Lamoriello's now at the Island, and he's making a hard press to get John Tavares signed to a long-term contract with probably as much money as he can give him as possible to keep that team relevant. Because Tavares, I mean, I would assume isn't very happy with the way things have gone and the way Garth Snow has managed the roster. How do you feel about, first of all, Tavares staying in the Island? And secondly, the longest shot ever I mean, because I feel like I titled this part, "Could the impossible be possible?" Yeah. I don't see Tavares landing in Anaheim whatsoever. But what do you make of the situation and overall what you think he could be thinking about when in terms of coming out west?
Yeah, I don't think the Ducks have a shot at John Tavares, and I think the only way it would even be considered is, again, if Ryan Kesler is determined that he's going to miss the entire season, and more so likely if he was forced to retire that the Ducks would even consider it. I mean, if there's any chance Ryan Kesler comes back and that $6.8 million salary comes back on the books, if you go out and you sign a guy like John Tavares, so he's probably going to get at least $10 million per season based off the elite superstars in the National Hockey League, and the fact that we haven't seen a guy like this hit free agency in a long time. The closest we got was with Steven Stamkos, and then he signed the deal days before free agency. So I don't think it's possible for the Ducks. They would have to have Kessler's contract off the books, and there would have to be no possibility of him returning to Anaheim for that to happen. As for John Tavares' future, I think the most likely scenario for him is he probably resigns in New York with the Islanders, and that
always.
I mean, that might fringe on them going out and pursuing a guy like James Van Riemsdyk or Ilya Kovalchuk and bringing in some suitable wingers to play with him. But there is some promise there. I mean, you've got Matt Barzal, who was the Rookie of the Year this year in the National Hockey League. It was just a great season for him. So there's some upside there. They've got some good young prospects coming up on the blue line and in net. So there's some hope for the future. I mean, Tavares is 27. He's still got some good years left, probably about 5 or 6 years left, where you really think he's got the best shot in his career of winning the Cup. And it's going to come down if he thinks he's going to have those best years with the Islanders or if he's going to have it somewhere else. And I think in the end he'll resign in New York, but there's going to be a lot of teams out there willing to pay big money for John Tavares. You know, Montreal, San Jose, St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas. I mean, pretty much any team that could afford him and needs either a 1 or a 2 center. I mean, Toronto's been rumored to be in on him. Columbus,
they're on everybody. Oh my god,
I know, but you know, Columbus is an interesting one for me because they desperately need a franchise first line center more than anybody. I mean, they've got Pierre-Luc Dubois, who could probably be a second line guy when he reaches his full potential. Alexander Wenberg's a second line guy, third line guy, but they don't have that John Tavares type of player. I mean, imagine him playing with Artemi Panarin on the first line in Columbus. That's really all they need, in my opinion, to push them over the hump. I mean, they've got a Vezina goaltender in Bobrovsky. They've got elite blue liners, young blue liners in Seth Jones and Zach Werenski. I guess you can call him a franchise player. I mean, he's their best player in Artemi Panarin. I mean, that, in my opinion, would be the best fit if he wanted to win championships now and into the future would be Columbus, but I don't know if they end up pulling the trigger or not.
Those good old Canadian boys always re-sign with their hometown.
Yeah.
With the people who drafted them. They never go anywhere. I mean, poor Shane Doan suffered all the way to the end. It's just he's not moving
ended up
anywhere.
Going back to Tampa Bay, even though all the rumors where he was going to go to Toronto, and then he ends up signing back in Tampa. And, of course, it's worked out well for him so far. So I think I think JT goes back to the island, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, the situation is, I think, hinges on more than just player personnel there. I think where they're going to be actually playing their games is important because they're playing in Brooklyn right now, and that's been just a big mess for them and for John Tavares. So I think he needs some clarification on the future of where the Island are going to be playing, and that needs to be a long-term thing for him if he's going to re-sign there.
Didn't they get an arena deal done?
I believe so. I believe they're back out there, but that's just one part of stuff that needs to happen. I think for him to stay there, there's a lot going on with the Islanders. That's a big mess, and the arena was one part of that. Some help
how about a guy
who
can stop a puck?
Exactly, some help on the wing, an actual goaltender in the island. I mean, they have a good guy over in Russia, but with Russian players, you never know when they're going to come over. I mean, see Evgeny Kuznetsov, it took him forever to come over to Washington.
And Nikushin's coming back too, I heard.
Yeah, but then with goaltenders, again, the development time for goaltenders is even longer, and you've got 3 great goaltenders in Russia right now, one for the Islanders, one for the Rangers. I can't remember where the other guy ends up playing for, but the time waiting for these guys to come over seems like it's even longer than waiting for some of the forwards to come over, and the Islanders need him now. because trying to win with Yaroslav Halak or Thomas Greiss is just going to cut it, and you don't get these elite goaltenders in free agency.